Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato, and today we're joined by a special guest, actually. He's James Foster. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him in a minute. One of my favorite follows over the last few years on draft Twitter, just constantly grinding tape. I actually think that among all the people who grind tape, I'm not sure I've seen anybody do more tape and more prospects than you, James. Before the show, you told me you're now 300 prospects deep. And one thing you didn't want to promote, but I will promote for you, is you have a big draft board out there that I've been referencing and looking at to try to prep for this show. It's a 2025 draft board. Really cool app you found it on. I'll share that in the comments after this episode so people can find it, but it's 300 deep. It's a lot of prospects. So we're going to talk football today. Before we do that, more construction in my house, so I will be holding the mic today. I've had to rejigger this whole setup, but I wanted to get the good mic in, so I'll be on mute a lot because there's construction here. So we're going to really let James shine on this one. But James Foster, you can find him on YouTube at James Foster. Just type that in. On Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it, at NoFlagsFilm. He's an NFL draft analyst for the 33rd team. And my God, go to his Twitter page. You'll see what I'm talking about. Just constant film cut-ups, constant film breakdowns. Awesome stuff. Really some of the best resources I've found this draft season. I'm not just saying that because you're here, James. So without further ado, how you doing today, James?
Doing great, man. Happy to be here.
James, I wanted to start with one of the first things I saw on your Twitter, your X, again, whatever the hell we're calling it. And that is you had about a 2-minute long clip of Kevin Winston Jr., the Penn State safety. And I kind of wanted to just put his name out there. And I know it doesn't necessarily apply to the New York Giants right now. It's likely the Giants aren't going to go safety after signing Javon Holland. But I had my eye on Kevin Winston Jr. before the Giants made that signing of Javon Holland. And I just wanted you to be able to talk about his skill set and what he has to offer, because he missed most of the 2024 season with that partially torn ACL. And I feel like he's kind of slipping through the cracks a little bit, but he's a damn good football player. And I wanted to put him on our audience's radar.
Yeah, I love him as a prospect. Actually had a higher grade on him heading into the year than Malachi Starks. Obviously fell a bit because of the injury, but he's still 37th on my board. I think pretty comfortably the best run defending safety in this class, even with just 1 year of sample size of tape. Like in 2023, he didn't miss a single tackle and led Penn State in tackles overall. I just think, has the perfect blend of size, tackling consistency, the ability to shed blocks, fits the run with authority. I think just going to immediately upgrade in that phase. He's a very young player and does need to develop his coverage instincts. Not that there's a lot of busts or explosive plays that he gives up or anything. It's just he doesn't really see things quickly enough at this point to get into passing windows quickly enough. Only has one career interception, and I think that that kind of stuff can sometimes be noisy, but in his case it does speak to kind of instincts that he's still developing. But yeah, he's my safety 3 right now. And I think somebody that, as long as the injury checks out, I feel pretty confident will be a top 50 pick.
And with Kevin Winston Jr. as well, the Penn State safety that we're discussing, a safety like that who can fit as well as he does, that is so in demand right now around the National Football League, with all the quarters and all the cover 4 and all the defenses employing safeties from depth. So I wanted to ask you one more question on the safety position, because the Giants, behind their top 2 guys, Tyler Nubin and Javon Holland, you have Dane Belton, who's entering his last year of his deal. And I think if there is a value on day 3 at the safety position, the Giants may look to add another safety. We always talked about how Shane Bowen, the Giants defensive coordinator, has used multiple safety sets. Right now, I don't know if they trust Dane Belton. So do you have a safety who was like a light version of Kevin Winston Jr., someone who might be around on day 3, who's good at fitting the run and who has excellent eye discipline and who sees the field well? Is there somebody deeper in the draft that fits that bill?
Yeah, I really like RJ Mickens out of Clemson. Tested really well at the combine, has extremely long arms for a safety. He's really good in the box, but also has the range where he can kind of play all over the field. And really good ball production across his career. He has as much experience as anyone in this class, but he's not like a super old player. He's just started ever since he's been there at Clemson. So really like RJ Mickens. And I'd also shout out, if they're going like super developmental, Keaton Crawford out of Nevada was one of the best testers at the combine. And they run a lot of quarters coverage in Nevada. I think that for Shane Bowen, he could kind of be a scheme fit, somebody that's really good at playing like off man and closing from depth.
For someone of your caliber, when it comes to the film stuff, I know you go deep. So don't worry, audience, we're going to get to a lot of deep stuff. We'll get to multiple different draft picks. I thought it would pick up from there, Mike. The mic, I'm disappointed to hear it did not. Thank you for the heads up, though, Nick. We'll get to multiple different deep draft picks, second round, third round, even day 3. But I do want to start at the top with you, James. The Giants have the 3rd overall pick in this draft class. And looking at your big board, Cam Ward, we're going to rule him out for this topic. We've been doing that lately. I think he's going to the Titans. I don't think we need to spend too much time there. Now, after that, on your big board, the next ranked quarterback is Shedeur Sanders at 34. And then after him is Jalen Milroe at 51. Would either of those, I want to kind of get into the mind of you on like how you evaluate these prospects. Say it goes Ward 1, Abdul Carter 2, like a lot of people expect. Would you consider taking either of those two quarterbacks, Sanders or Milroe, over a player like Hunter at that point? Or where do you evaluate those players, and what do you see future-wise for somebody like Shedeur Sanders? Is his ceiling high enough in your mind to pass on a player like Travis Hunter, or do you have a high ceiling for Hunter?
Yeah, so the answer to that question would depend on who am I in this scenario. If I'm a GM with like unlimited job security and the decision that's best for the organization long term, I'm taking Travis Hunter and like really not even thinking twice about it. I think just a completely different caliber of prospects. Like I really see Hunter, Carter, and Ashton Genty as like the 3 blue chip prospects in this class. And, I think that when you get to evaluating it from Joe Shane's perspective, where you kind of have a rare like desperation for a quarterback in order to save your job, I would definitely, I would consider Shedeur Sanders a lot harder. I would still take Travis Hunter just because I think he's going to win you more games next year. But I would definitely take Shedeur Sanders into account a lot more in that situation.
Yeah, it's that situation the Giants have found themselves in when they decided to retain Joe Shane and Brian Daboll. It's like, is this pick going to be made out of desperation? So at the end of this season, if it doesn't work out, they can say, well, we have Shedeur. Remember when he came in at the end of the game and he played pretty well. We don't want to mess that up. He knows our offense. Yeah. That's not necessarily the best thing for the Giants long term, though. So I hate the fact that the Giants are in this situation. And ultimately, if that scenario is put in front of New York, I hope they go with Hunter as well.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter can I just think he's somebody where, you combine him with Malik Neighbors, all of a sudden that's one of the most dynamic young receiver duos in the NFL. I mean, forget young, just dynamic receiver duos across the league. But then if Deonte Banks doesn't pick it up, I think could be one of the best corners in the NFL too. And he kind of has, I think he's a blue chip prospect at both positions, but he has a rare floor because if he does end up being a bust at one position, he almost has like half the bust rate of a normal prospect because then you just try him at the other one.
That's a great point. I mean, he's a really unique prospect. I want to touch a little before we move past that on just what you saw on tape from Sanders, and then I want you to get to Milroe because Milroe, I think you have up on 51 on your big board, and it is adjusted for positions. I would say that's pretty high versus consensus. So I want to hear about Milroe, but also Sanders. Like as far as Sanders goes, if you're going to take someone at 3 overall, in my mind, he has to have top 5 or top 10 upside at the quarterback position. That's for me a non-negotiable. I know others differ on that. Some people are just like, whatever, we just got to take a quarterback. And even if he's like the 15th or 16th best, it's fine. Like just take a swing. In your mind, does he have a chance? What kind of caliber quarterback in the NFL, if he hits his ceiling, could he be? And then talk a little bit about Milroe.
Yeah, I mean, I'll never really say like somebody's ceiling. I don't like to talk about somebody's ceiling because like nobody would have said Tom Brady has a high ceiling when he was coming out. But I think if we're talking like 90th percentile outcomes, I don't really see Shedeur Sanders being a top 10 or 12 quarterback, just because I think he kind of lacks the exceptional traits that would be necessary in terms of arm talent and also mobility. And while I do think he's a smart player and he's accurate, I'm not sure that he's quite like automatic enough as a processor to really offset that. Colorado's offense is kind of weird. It's nowhere near like a Tennessee or Ole Miss where it's just impossible to evaluate the processing. But once you filter out all the screens, they kind of run like 3 plays. They do throw over the middle of the field a good bit, but it's a really spread out offense, and it's like a lot of just kind of slants and like glance routes. I don't know. I think that like within what they asked him to do, he was a really solid decision maker. Doesn't turn the ball over hardly at all. I think his turnover worthy play rate of 1.5% is one of the lowest in this class. I think that he is somebody that needs to see things open before he really pulls the trigger, not really an anticipatory thrower, which for somebody that I don't think has the zip to like drive it into tight windows, you kind of need one of those things to give to really be a successful intermediate passer in the NFL. So to me, if I'm saying like what's the most likely outcome for Shedeur Sanders, it's kind of like a Mac Jones or Kenny Pickett kind of deal where he like I think early on it wouldn't surprise me if you draft Shedeur Sanders, he performs at kind of like he's the 15th or 16th best quarterback as a rookie. You go into the next year saying like, oh, okay, well he was young, he's going to take another step forward, but then he kind of like levels out and maybe ends up starting for 4 or 5 years and just kind of never is able to take that next step.
And then talk a little bit about Milroe, because Milroe is also somebody who I'm excited about as well as you are.
Yeah, Milroe is one of the tougher evaluations in this class. I think that your opinion on Milroe is more so than anyone is going to be dependent on what games you watch, because if you watch him any games the first 6 weeks of the season, so like Wisconsin, Georgia, Vanderbilt, he looks like a top 5 pick. I mean, obviously the mobility, I think he's the best running quarterback prospect of all time. Just in terms of like pure straight line speed, explosiveness. Guys like Lamar Jackson were definitely more elusive than him, but when you combine the speed with kind of his running back build, his ability as a true dual threat quarterback gets me really excited. But like I said, early in the season seemed to have taken that jump that we wanted to see and was playing like a top 5, potentially first overall type of pick. Then he follows that up with 2 of the worst games of his career against Tennessee and South Carolina, where he's, incredibly inaccurate, making bad decisions. They kind of, Alabama really like reels him back and kind of just commits to the run game. And so you get the LSU and like Auburn, Oklahoma game, Missouri, where they're really leaning on his legs, and then kind of limps to the finish line with a really bad game against Michigan in the bowl game. So it's he's somebody that I think took a significant step forward this year, actually, when it comes to reading the middle of the field and sack avoidance. Like he had a 32% pressure to sack rate in 2023, which is about as high as you'll see. And you cut that down to 18.5%, which still room for improvement there, but a major improvement there. His biggest kind of like area of regression, I thought, was just ball placement and accuracy. His deep ball is actually okay, but really struggles with like deep to intermediate sideline shots. So like hole shots into cover 2 and stuff like that. So many corners and deep outs that he's that are landing out of bounds. I think that he's got to have a redshirt year to fix his footwork and there's still room for improvement when it comes to processing. But when it comes to quarterback 3 in this class, I'm just a lot more excited in the upside of Jalen Milroe than I am of guys like Tyler Shuck or Jackson Dart.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Look, we all love to work out. The summer's coming around. You want to look good in your bathing suit. But in order to enhance your workout, you want to go and use MitoPure from Timeline. This is a great product. When I started using it, it makes me feel stronger, gives me more energy. I recover quicker. I'm in my 30s. I still have the energy to work out. And if you want that energy, you really should give Timeline's MitoPure a shot and work it into your routine. This, the great year of 2025, is your year to be the best, most energized, most revitalized you. MitoPure promotes cellular renewal and mitochondrial health to address common signs of aging at the root. MitoPure is the research-backed innovation that unlocks your fullest potential. Timeline is offering 10% off your order of MitoPure right now. So go to timeline.com/banter. It's timeline.com/banter. That's TIMELINE.
Yeah, on that front, it's interesting to me because I said, and I thought it was a bit of a hot take, but to me, from what I've watched, I think Milroe is the best running quarterback I've seen since Lamar, and that includes guys like Jaden Daniels, and I think you did a great job illustrating why. And I think a lot of it, what's held against him is how the season ended. But people's assumption that, look, this guy is not a good processor. This guy's the one. But if you kind of go through a lot of the tape, and I think you've kind of shown this by breaking down, because I see this in your rankings, you have Jackson Dart low, and you have, I think, Mitch Trubisky as his NFL comp. If you go through some of the tape of these other guys, like, is Jackson Dart really processing, or is he kind of just running that Lane Kiffin scheme, half field, one read, head down, run? So I don't really find too much processing going on. Even you mentioned with Shador, it's running a very simple offense. The most creative processor I saw from an anticipation standpoint is Cam Ward, and I didn't really see too many other examples of it. So I think they're all kind of projects, so why not go with the tools is kind of how I'm looking at it. But let's move past quarterbacks for now, unless there's anyone else you wanted to touch on specifically. We can maybe come back to them. And let's start to talk about that 34th pick for the Giants and later picks. I think that's where you can really shine for us here, James. So a few players that we've pinpointed at 34 that we're looking for the Giants, Nick and I, are Derek Harmon, Kenneth Grant, if he falls. A player you really like, though, that I want you to talk about, because I really like him as well, I think he's all the way up at 26th on your big board, is Booker from Alabama, the offensive guard, the interior offensive lineman. I finally start to look at him, and man, Nick, we watched a lot of Evan Neal at Alabama. This is a totally different looking prospect when you watch him in pass protection. He anchors, and he's really good when it comes to the balance. So what are your thoughts on him, James?
Yeah, Tyler Booker might have, I think it's pretty clearly the best anchor in this class. I'm trying to think of a college offensive lineman with a better anchor. Bull rushes just completely end on contact when they hit Tyler Booker. He's not even having to take one step back into the pocket to gather himself. Really long arms for a guard, 34 and 7/8 inches for his arm length. His wingspan is 97th percentile, 99th percentile hand size. He's just a massive human, heavy hands, but also really skilled with his punch. The issue with Tyler Booker is just a lack of foot speed, and I would say a poor combine performance, but it wasn't necessarily a disappointing combine performance because you kind of watch him try to pull or reach on outside zone. You can see he's not that athletic. He's a pure phone booth guy. So kind of scheme dependent, and you just got to be conscious about what you're asking him to do. I still think he's good enough with his hands that it didn't show up as an issue very often in pass pro. And I think that he can still be a high quality pass protecting guard. I think that the size, the main area that it really is going to limit him is what he can do in the run game. But, in this class, he's still a top 32 player to me.
So are there any other interior offensive linemen who are being entertained at pick 34? The Giants have a lot of needs, but offensive line is something that the New York Giant fans, we want investment in the offensive line. So I'm thinking of guys like Gray Zabel or players of that nature. So please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so Gray Zabel is definitely the first guy that I would mention. Somebody that played left tackle at North Dakota State, but could slide into center or guard. Really, really good hand usage, really good anchor, and then just an absolute mauler in the run game. Wasn't really tested by the level of competition that he faced, but I think he answered a lot of those concerns with his performance at the Senior Bowl, where he was the best offensive lineman there. With a very close grade to Gray Zabel would be Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State, who is kind of a prototypical guard with really good length, really good size. I mean, for pretty much all of his career, I was kind of like, I would either be like watching him kind of adjacently while I'm watching other Ohio State offensive linemen or watching him individually. And I viewed him as purely a guard. But with Josh Simmons going down with injury, he slides over to left tackle. His first week starting there gets baptized by Abdul Carter, but then gradually goes from like being a good story of somebody that's kind of playing out of position but just performing admirably to legitimately being a shutdown left tackle for pretty much the entire college football playoffs. I just think his hand usage, how strong he is when he secures contact, just like the grip strength. I think he does project as a guard at the next level, but I would be intrigued to try him out at tackle if you had a need there. But yeah, those would be the two interior offensive linemen that I would be considering at 34. Assuming that like Kelvin Banks, is off the board. I think really the only guy that would kind of be in play there. So yeah, Donovan Jackson, Gray Zabel are the two guys I'd be looking at.
That's Donovan Jackson from Ohio State and Gray Zabel from North Dakota State.
Yep. And I want to, and obviously this is assuming Booker would be off the board at that point. Would he be atop your list there at 34 among the interior offensive linemen?
Yep.
Okay. So just a great job, by the way, Nick, of bringing up the names and the colleges. I know we sometimes miss that, so let's try to do that as well. So let me ask you a question, keeping it on the offensive line, James. 34 is not typically the best spot, in my opinion, to get offensive tackles at historically in the NFL draft. It's typically just been, look, you either get them up top in the draft or they typically don't work out. With that said, there's been some makes lately. Christian Darrisaw was a late 20s pick. So I don't think it's impossible to find an offensive tackle at 34. There are some intriguing names that I think could potentially fall to 34. One, due to potential injury situation that not a lot of people know, have a lot of information on. I'm sure the NFL teams have more information on. And then a few other players who I think could stand out here as possibilities for the Giants if they want to find their tackle of the future. Are there names that stand out to you at 34 that you would be willing to invest in that you think have a long-term future starting at offensive tackle in the NFL?
So the top guy who I think could potentially fall is who I just mentioned, Josh Simmons out of Ohio State, who was their left tackle until he went down with a torn patellar, and in like week 7, I believe, he was, based on his tape over the first half of the season, he was the best offensive lineman in this class. Somebody that I really liked heading into the year. I think like had kind of fringe first round tape in 2023, but seemed to clean up all of his issues with anchoring and kind of some sloppy footwork. He is an extremely athletic left tackle, really good balance, fits any run scheme. The problem is that the competition that he faced is just nowhere near like most of the guys in this class. He was really dominant, but it was against like Iowa and Michigan State were the two best teams that he faced. So he didn't get to see Abdul Carter, really any of the tough competition that was on Ohio State's schedule. So yeah, Josh Simmons, he's somebody that obviously has the injury concern. I know that there's some like maturity concerns with him that I think will have him fall later than he should based on talent anyways. But he's the first guy that I would mention. Kelvin Banks out of Texas at 30. I have him as a guard on my board, but that's more just, I think that's his best position in the NFL. I think he could play tackle. he just has really really refined hand usage, a ton of experience as Texas left tackle, good anchor. He's explosive as a puller. Like about once per game, they let him get out in space and just end somebody's life. My issue with Kelvin Banks is that he has really, really poor balance in the run game, and he's constantly lunging and falling off of blocks. And like one of my biggest draft misses was Evan Neal, and I remember that it was one of my first years like doing a full board, and I remember watching his tape, and I would see him fall down all the time, and I remember thinking like, that's kind of concerning. I don't know. I'll still give him like a grade, so he's my number 1 overall player, but then like ended up kind of being an issue, and also he had some issues with just like Bama's scheme protecting him from really having to take deep pass sets. But yeah, ever since Evan Neal, I've kind of sworn off people that fall down a lot. So that's a pretty big red flag for me for Kelvin Banks, and I've got him at 30 on my board. But yeah, those are the 2 tackles that I would mention. And then if those guys are gone, I would say Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon.
Gotta love it, right? Evan Neal making all the draft analysts alter how they see tape. Of course, it's a New York Giant. So unfortunate. Dan, are we done with the offensive line? And would you like to transition maybe to the defensive line? Because I think there's a lot there that I really want to go over.
Yeah, let's make that transition. Before we do that, though, I wanted to get a quick overview from you on Connerly as a prospect, because he's really intriguing to me from an athletic standpoint, and he's definitely in my short list for 34.
Yeah, he's somebody that kind of checks every box in terms of athleticism, size. There's a big thing with the arm length measurements at the combine being like the guy who did it, I think messed it up because it's so much shorter than all of the summer measurements, all of the bowl measurements, all of the pro day measurements. But like he measured in with 34 and a quarter inch arms. So comfortably above the threshold there, had a 34 and a half inch vertical, which is 96th percentile for tackles. He has, what I really like about Josh Connerly is that he's comfortable using a bunch of different techniques as a pass blocker. A lot of these guys kind of like in their college systems, they're just trained to do one thing. Like Will Campbell only knows how to 2-hand punch. And it works in college when you're just better than your competition. But in the NFL, you've got to be able to use everything. You got to be able to play with independent hands. Josh Connerly Jr. can kind of do all of that already. And so I think that gives him a much less steep learning curve projecting to the NFL. He's an extremely athletic run blocker. He can mirror, he can protect the corner, but then also mirror inside counters. I thought he had the best performance of anyone against Abdul Carter this year pretty comfortably. So yeah, I really like Josh Connerly Jr. The one hang up is just sometimes he will be a little bit late with his hands, and he'll let people into his frame, and that's where he can kind of get walked back by bull rush. Like he had that one really bad rep against Mike Green at the Senior Bowl, but it also kind of shows up on his tape occasionally. So yeah, he's 31 on my board, and if he's sitting there at 34, like I think that you could convince me to take Connerly Jr. over Kelvin Banks, even if you're choosing between the two.
Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon must be a strong guy. He obviously takes Timeline Mito Pure. Head to timeline.com/banter to get 10% off. Had to get that ad in there, guys.
I like it, Nick. You want to head to defense side of the ball at 34?
Yes, let's talk about the defensive line prospects at pick 34. So we're looking at Derek Harm. There's a lot of guys we can go. And even if you want to dive a little bit deeper into players who may fall to the third round, talk about some of your favorite defensive line prospects in that chunk of the draft. Because I think the Giants could double dip. There's a possibility that they double dip, and I would not complain if they do double dip.
You may not complain real quick, James, but I know this about Nick. He is not a fan of double dipping when it comes to dips, chips and dip. That is not a guy.
Yeah, it's disgusting, dude. Like, who would do that? You take a bite of
I'm not a double dip guy either. Let me be clear. I don't do the double dipping either.
Like, That's an absolutely
With that
horrendous
said,
thing
if I
to do to
did
other
see a
people.
double dip happen, I think I could go on and still continue to eat from that dip. I think if you saw a double dip happen, Nick, that would be it. That dip is done.
Probably, it really would depend on the person, right? If the person's a slob, there's no chance I'm doing
All
that.
right.
But if I like the person, you know, I might be able to double dip.
Sorry, James. Go.
So if we're talking 34, I think probably the first guy that comes to mind for me would be Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. Took a huge step forward this year, former number 1 recruit in the 2022 recruiting class. Started his career at Texas A&M, transferred to Ole Miss. He is just an athletic, disruptive 3 technique that lives in the backfield. Really good explosiveness and lateral quickness to cross blockers' face as a pass rusher. He has some of the heaviest hands in this class. Like when he makes contact, just there's a rep against Wake Forest that sticks out where like he rattles the pads and just like launches a blocker into the backfield. I think that, he kind of, when I was keeping up with him every couple of weeks during the season, and over the first half of the year, I was thinking that this could be a potential top 10, top 5 type of pick. The consistency kind of dropped off over the second half of the year. And, like early in the season, his bull rush was really effective, but then the pad level was kind of rising a lot more. And just, he has a really high motor, like within a specific play. Like you don't see him give up on plays or anything like that, but throughout the course of a game, he will kind of disappear for stretches. So I thought the tape was just a lot less consistent over the second half of the season. So I've got him at 22 on my board, but I'm seeing him like out of the first round in a lot of mock drafts. I think if he's available there at 34, you take him for sure. Derek Harmon out of Oregon is the other guy that you mentioned. Just a really well-rounded, powerful 3 tech, good against the run, very disruptive pass rusher, but kind of lacking the flexibility and balance when he gets into the pocket to finish plays. So he had a lot more pressures than he did sacks and TFLs. So those are kind of the 2 players that I think could be like starting high quality 3 techs that give you high impact play in run defense and as pass rushers. When you get later down the board, Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State, I think is a pure run defender, probably has the best anchor in this class. I watched pretty much all of his tape and never saw him get put on the ground. I think just extremely solid in that area. Pass rushing happens kind of in flashes. It can be really hard to evaluate some of these college defensive tackles because a lot of them are asked to play the run first. And so like you can't really evaluate their, explosiveness off the snap because like they're just reading the blocks and playing the run first and foremost. So that kind of ends up happening a lot with Tyleik Williams where he isn't really shooting upfield and most of his pressures have to come as late reactions, like after play action or something like that. So those would be my top 3 guys, and we can get deeper down the board if y'all want.
Yeah, I'd like to bring up Omar Norman Lott and Alfred Collins as 2 players who, look, I've seen a little bit of each. I've liked what I've seen. So if you could just expound on what you've seen from them and if you think they would be available possibly in the mid 60s if the Giants do forego defensive tackle at 34 or they do the double dip.
Yeah, so mid 60s is a perfect range for them because they're 64 and 65 on my board. I think if you combine the 2 players, you're talking about a potential guy that like the Giants might select at 3 because Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee is one of the best pass rushing specialists in this class. And Alfred Collins out of Texas is one of the best run defenders in this class. So Norman Lott played in Tennessee's kind of platoon system where he's averaging 17 snaps a game. And like the same thing can be said for James Pierce and like every other player that was on Tennessee's rotation. So it's not like nothing specifically bad about them. It's just, and I went to Tennessee, so I'm a Tennessee fan, and kind of follow them closely, but they just had a ton of depth and like didn't play anybody full time.
It's like watching a hockey line almost. Like they're just like shuffling out different lines.
Yeah. So, and the snaps that he did play were almost exclusively pass rushing snaps. Like he was never really in there for early downs. And so, he has some rough plays in run defense, but it's really just like he was never on the field as a run defender. Led FBS defensive lineman in pass rush win rate last year. Again, very small sample size. But man, he's able to hit you with so many different ways of winning as a pass rusher. He can win with power. Does a great job of using the forklift technique, which is like you're catching the punch by the wrists and kind of latching the blocker's hands, preventing them from landing a strike. Also has a nice cross chop, arm over. I think that in an expanded role, he's somebody that it's kind of a cliche, but I think will be a lot better in the NFL than he was in college, and pretty underutilized. With that being said, though, like I do still have a 3rd round grade on him because I think he is a complimentary player, and I'm not sure that it's hard to project him as a full-time starter. Alfred Collins is kind of similar, just really with the opposite side of the ball. Like he doesn't give you anything as a pass rusher, but I think it's between him and Tyleik Williams as the best run defenders in this class. So Alfred Collins is massive, 6'5.5", 332 pounds, almost 35-inch arms. He just has devastating block shedding ability. I mean, I can't imagine trying to run the ball between the tackles against Alfred Collins and Dexter Lawrence. That would be like opposing offenses would go to like a sweep and toss only offensive scheme. I think he's going to dominate the A gaps. I think that I remember watching him some last year, and he was a lot lighter. He put on weight for this year and became like a true nose tackle. When he was lighter, he had more gap shooting and like pass rushing upside, I think, and could make some more splash plays, quick plays in the backfield. This year, he was just a very clunky, awkward pass rusher. I don't see a whole lot of upside in that phase, but somebody that's going to immediately upgrade your run defense.
It's funny with a guy like Alfred Collins because you can employ like an Okie type of front or like an eagle front where you have like 4 eyes or 5 techniques even on the outside with this dude in the middle, and he can just be like this force who can occupy both of those A gaps and possibly even cheat over to a B gap if you need him to, because he has that type of run defense ability. Now, there was one more name I wanted to ask you about on the defensive line, and that is actually 2 more names if I can. Jordan Phillips from Maryland and TJ Sanders from South Carolina, because those are 2 other names who could be within that range of the draft that the New York Giants could target the defensive line. So what are your opinions on those 2 players, Jordan Phillips from Maryland and TJ Sanders from South Carolina?
So I've got TJ Sanders 59th on my board. This is a really deep defensive tackle class, by the way. I've got 14 defensive tackles in my top 100. So think that whether it's 2nd or 3rd round, you're going to be able to find somebody that can contribute. But TJ Sanders, really good explosiveness, lateral twitch to win the edges as a pass rusher. I think that, I was pretty underwhelmed with some of his run defense tape. I thought that like his anchor was kind of fragile. Really struggled with combo blocks. Like when somebody would gallop into him, he'd kind of get uprooted, and just not somebody that's built to take on double teams. But he's a slashing, disruptive 3 tech that can make plays in the backfield. He can stack and shed single blocks for sure, but not somebody that you want over the A gap ideally. And then Jordan Phillips is a really interesting player. My high-end comp for him is Deron Payne. Kind of a sawed-off frame, 6'1.5", 312 pounds, pretty short arms, but he is just so much like dense power and explosiveness. He has never had a sack, I'm pretty sure, in his college career, just 13 pressures in 2024. He's another example of a player, though, where his first, second, and third job in Maryland's defense was to play the run. And so every single pressure or win that he had, it started like 3 or 4 seconds into the play when he transitions from run defender to pass rusher. So it's hard to judge him on the same kind of scale that you judge other players. But another guy with just incredible hand pop. You can like feel it through the screen when he makes contact with a block. And then he's got burst off the line of scrimmage where he can shoot into gaps. He can create some serious knockback when he gets into his bull rush. He's got a spin move that he'll use occasionally. And I'm kind of optimistic that if he is used in a more full-time role, that he can be a much more productive pass rusher in the NFL, because you see a pass rushing plan kind of in development, and him being able to win with a lot of different moves. So I'm a big fan of Jordan Phillips. Also got to mention that he was probably the best player at the Shrine Bowl, I would say, from watching the tape. So big fan of Jordan Phillips.
Out of all the guys you mentioned, and that was a lot. And by the way, I just want to shout this out again. Please go find James Foster on YouTube. You can just type in James Foster. This is the exact type of content that our audience likes, and we know that. And so you've been asking us to find more analysts like this. We got one for you, and I think he's pretty much shown his chops so far, and it's been really exciting and really informative on the show for our audience and us, James. So thank you for that. Now, with that said, I think Nick, you and I are going to have a lot to talk about when it comes to these interior defensive linemen, because there are a lot of names right there. I think just given the way NFL drafts continue to work out, a lot of these guys will be available at 34 and 6'5". You may look at it right now and say, there's no way, they're too good. But that's how the draft works. Like, teams don't go deep IDLs that high all the time. They have other needs they got to fill. And a lot of these teams will take need over talent. So there's players. I mean, to me, Collins has stood out before we even talked. James is someone I want on the Giants in round 3 if we pass on round 2. And honestly, Nick, it's going to be interesting, because as we get to that round 2 range at 34, I want one of these D-line for sure, but I'm not as like, I got to get one, because I think I can get one at 64 and honestly, potentially even 99. There could be somebody that falls to that spot. But let me ask you one more question about 34 as we move back. The Giants are possibly taking a player like Abdul Carter at 3 if he's there. It's in their own possibility. We've heard from Joe Shane. We've heard from a lot of the people who are making these decisions that they're not going to be afraid to take a pass rusher. It goes back to an old Giants adage and saying you can never have too many pass rushers. Some of their best teams and best rosters have been built on the pass rush. So with that said, if they are willing to pass on D-tackle or interior defensive line at 34 with the idea that, wow, there's still a lot of these guys on the board we can get one at 65. Are there some edge rushers that you think could be on the board at 34 that really stand out to you as players that you would consider taking for if you're the Giants?
Oh yeah, it's just as deep at edge as it is on the interior, and I tend to agree. I think edge is going to be a position where, for as deep as it is, every team could justify spending a top 100 pick at edge, and so the result of that is that you're just going to see a bunch of edge rushers get taken early. Whereas like defensive linemen, teams, like you said, they'll kind of weirdly pass on players. Like somebody like Darius Alexander out of Toledo, who's a really old prospect. I like him a lot. I could see him falling. There's a lot of defensive tackles that I could see falling more so than edge. So when you're looking at 34, I think that, assuming like Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M and Michael Williams out of Georgia are off the board, which I think is pretty safe. Donovan Izaraku out of Boston College would be my next favorite, and I think he's probably a good bet to get taken in the first round. Really good speed rusher, kind of an undersized guy with with really long arms, like disproportionately for his size. I think that James Pierce Jr. is probably the next guy out of Tennessee, probably the next guy that would be available. He's a really weird player because it's a unique combination of strengths and weaknesses. So he's this tall, slender pass rusher with kind of short arms, but he's incredibly explosive in a straight line. Doesn't have great bend, but then he's a much better power rusher than you would expect for someone of his physical makeup. And I also think a better run defender than I would expect, and a lot better than he was in 2023. He has he's got some serious like football character stuff, and knowing people like in the program, I can vouch for a lot of the stuff that's kind of come out. He's quite a character. So I'm not even sure if I would be comfortable with him at 34 just based on that. But like on the field, I do think he's probably a top 25 player in this class. My guy in this edge class is Braden Swinson out of LSU. He led the SEC with 60 pressures last year. He's somebody that can win in every way as a pass rusher. He's got good speed. He has quickness to win with counters, very powerful. I don't think he's a great run defender, but somebody that can just be a really high caliber number two. My high end comp for him is Bruce Irvin. I think that like he's 80th on the consensus board, but I've got him 27th on my board. So I'm way higher on him. But yeah, when I go on all these shows and people ask me for edge rushers, like my answer is almost always Braden Swinson, no matter where they are in the draft. Like if he's there, take him.
What about the UCLA kid, Oluwafemi Oludejo? And did I say that correctly?
Your guess is as good as mine. So I'll go with that. Yeah, he's my edge 10. Really like him. I've got him 61 overall. Really impressed with the development that he was able to show in such a short time actually playing edge, because was kind of miscast as an off-ball linebacker for most of his career. Actually played a couple games this year at off-ball linebacker before finally making the switch to edge, and still in development, but there's just a lot of promising flashes. He pretty much only has a cross chop and speed to power at this point. For someone with his build, I would have expected him to lean into power a lot more often. I thought it was pretty effective when he did go to it, but really nice cross chop. Just needs to continue to add counters and really develop his pass rushing plan. And his tape is just a little bit inconsistent week to week. Like the Penn State game was absolutely dominant. He had a few really nice performances, but also would kind of go on longer cold streaks than some other edge rushers in this class. I do really like what he brings as a run defender, and you can see the off-ball linebacker background just with his physicality and his feel for making plays in the backfield. So that does kind of raise his floor, because I think he's somebody that can contribute immediately on early downs.
Linebacker is an interesting position when it comes to the NFL draft. I honestly feel like a lot of times teams are scared to draft an inside linebacker, an off-ball linebacker, for a risk of just it being a wasted pick in their mind. And it ultimately leads to a lot of players falling that shouldn't. In my mind, I had Leo Chanel with a top 50 grade in his draft class. He ends up going, I think, 99 or 100 to the Chiefs. I think I was honestly at that point too low on him to be a top 50 grade. He's one of the best players in that draft class. So a player that stands out to me that I think will be there at 65 overall, despite him being number 39 overall on your big board, honestly could be there at 99. I doubt it, but you just don't know with things like what happened with Chanel. Is the linebacker out of UCLA, Carson I think it's Schwessinger. Is that how you pronounce his last name? My guess is as good as yours. Schwessinger.
He's so fun, dude.
Very fun player. I've watched very little, but what I've seen has been really fun to watch. And the Giants sent the linebacker coach to his pro day. So they haven't made this swing yet, despite Nick and I wanting an off-ball linebacker. prospect for a long time. I see him up at 39 on your big board. Can you talk to us a little bit about him?
I love Carson Schlesinger. Just an immediate trigger in the run game. And it's so impressive what he's been able to do as like really just having 1 year of starting experience. He plays the position like he's a fifth year senior and like veteran. I think that he really struggles to play through contact, and he gets put on the ground pretty frequently, which was, my biggest concern with his tape. It was really, I'm trying to see what his weight. Yeah. So he was listed at 225 at UCLA. And so like, that's kind of what you see on tape, is this undersized, like speedy, just guy with like, flying around the field type of player. But then at the combine and at his pro day, 242 pounds, still had a 39 and a half inch vertical, which was like the only thing he did at the combine, but then tested pretty well at his pro day. So he could come into the NFL and be kind of a completely different player. But based on college, that was really my big knock on him, is that he's getting pancaked like 2 or 3 times a game. I do think he does a great job of offsetting that issue by taking great angles to be able to find a path around blocks and sort of avoid contact. And like the fact that he reads the game so quickly, that allows him to stay ahead of block development. But outside of the anchor concerns, he pretty much checks every other box. He's a really like tenacious, high energy player. Like I said, flying around the field, but he hardly ever misses tackles. He shows really impressive instincts in zone coverage, especially, and like the ability to kind of backpedal, connect to deep in breakers that are developing behind him. That's something that just a lot of college linebackers, they're either not good at, but even more likely, they just don't even have any experience. Like as a traditional hook dropper, they're kind of just a QB spy hovering 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. So it's great that you get to see a lot of translatable zone coverage stuff from him. And then he's a special teams demon, plays every unit, and can be a high level contributor in that phase as well.
And it's 1 year, I believe, is all he's really had thriving. Before this last season, it was relatively mild and just relegated to special teams, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Dan, I wanted to pose this to you real quick. The Giants did that at 34. I mean, they're sending their linebacker coach there. Like, would that just like throw Giants Twitter into a blaze? How do you think that would be handled?
At 34, I think it would throw Giants Twitter into a blaze. I am not as against it, I guess, as Giants Twitter or whoever might be. It's early to take a linebacker, but I think he has that potential upside. But it would be something that's interesting. Let's move a little bit further down the line. I don't want to
actually have one more question on these positions for James,
yes.
and it's more edge and defensive line. I just wanted to get your opinions on these Texas A&M kids, man. Texas A&M, it's a weird school when it comes to their defense, but Shamar Stewart and Nick Scourton, those are 2 players who are being rumored first, second round. What's your opinions of those 2?
Shamar Stewart, I have as my edge 2, but I'm really sitting on the fence with this edge class, because I've got like 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. I've got all edge rushers just stacked right next to each other. So I think it's a really narrow gap. Shamar Stewart, it really comes down to like, ideally you get somebody like Abdul Carter who has the traits and the production. And those guys are going to have early first round grades. But if you can't check both of those boxes and you've got to choose between one, I am going to lean towards the athletic traits. And, I think you could make the case that he's the most athletic edge rusher to enter the draft since Myles Garrett in terms of size and movement skills. He just lacks. He's just not a natural pass rusher. His hands and feet are hardly ever in sync. You can tell that he's like going through in his head and like counting the steps that his D-line coach told him for how to use a move, because it's so segmented and choppy. you would think that he would be this dominant power rusher because of his size and explosiveness, but doesn't really win with his bull rush that often because he's hardly ever pointing his hips towards the blocker. So power gets dissipated pretty easily. He's got a lot of things to clean up. And, I would worry about like taking him in the top 10, but late first round, he would probably be the top guy in this class that I would go for. And then the other Texas A&M edge rusher, Nick Scourton, I actually am not sure how to pronounce his name. So I had him really high on my board heading into the season, but I'll be honest, I hated his tape this year. And I just think like the weight that he was playing at kind of limited what was already pretty average athletic traits. He's a very technically advanced pass rusher with a full move set, like so many different ways of winning. I just don't think he's athletic enough to pull off many of those, especially playing at like 280 pounds. Has a really good spin move that was kind of closed off this year. Like teams had a guard basically just waiting in the B gap to cut that off whenever he went to the inside spin. But somebody that has a naturally low center of gravity, good size, you would expect him to be a great power rusher, but had a hard time winning with his bull rush. I think that at the weight that he was playing at last year, it's just not a player that I would draft until like 4th round or so. But I do have a 3rd round grade on him because there's kind of some upside that maybe he can get back to his Purdue form and, drop like 15, 20 pounds like he was at the Senior Bowl and Combine and kind of be able to play a little bit more athletic. So I am still holding out some hope for Nick Scourton, but I just I was really disappointed with his tape. Probably the biggest faller from the year for me.
Interesting. And that's Scourton out of A&M edge rusher, potentially, or he may kick inside on some passing downs. Let me ask you a question about picks 99 and 105 the Giants have almost back-to-back. One's a comp pick and one's their natural 4th round pick. And then we'll get you out of here soon because we've kept you for a while here, James, but maybe do a couple late round stuff. But just looking at your big board, there's a few names I want to point out that could be in play for either of these 2 picks for the Giants. Wyatt Milliam, the guard out of West Virginia. We've talked about Jordan Phillips. I want to talk about linebacker Chris Paul out of Ole Miss. The guard out of Georgia, Tate Ratledge, who I think is really up on my list as a potential pick for the Giants in those 2 range. So 2 guards, a linebacker. Let's start there and let's move forward then maybe with some other players that could be in the mix there.
So Wyatt Milam out of West Virginia is a really tough one because I loved his tape. He had I think he went his entire college career with giving up 1 sack, really productive at West Virginia. He is just a mauler with a ton of experience, has really powerful hands, does a great job of using what's called like the flash bait technique, where he's kind of jabbing with the outside hand. Their pass rusher goes in to swipe it down and he pulls it back and kind of throws off their timing. Does a great job with that. The problem with him is that his Senior Bowl was just so rough. Like it's a really hard thing for me to square in my head because the tape is really clean, but just looked like he couldn't play at the Senior Bowl. So I did kind of drop my grade from him because of that. But still a top 100 player. And if he's available in the 3rd round, I think he could be a really good guard prospect. The other, we'll stick on the offensive line. So Tate Ratledge out of Georgia. He just has like really good size and raw power. Powerful hands in both phases. He's a mauling run blocker, really sturdy anchor, highly aware player with, you can tell that he has a lot of experience just without even looking up his snap counts. If you watch him on the field, the way that he communicates and processes stunts, a very smart player. He's more of a phone booth guard, kind of like a less extreme version of Tyler Booker, where he struggles to move his feet laterally, and so that can get him in trouble and expose the edges in pass pro. But I think that if you can, excuse maybe like one bad loss every 2 weeks, he could be a kind of borderline Pro Bowl level guard. And then who was the third guy? Chris Paul out of Ole Miss. So yeah, Chris Paul is an interesting player. I think that the arm length for me is probably my biggest concern with him. And he's a little bit undersized. I really care about arm length for linebackers probably as much as any position, because I think that just the ability to play off of blocks, it translates so much more closely there. But he's a really instinctive player. He had one of the best coverage reps in this class. He ended up dropping the interception, but it was against Arkansas, where he was kind of like playing the middle hook and just it felt a dig route coming from the backside. Was able to slide back into the passing lane. One of the lowest missed tackle rates among linebackers in college football. He has good, not great speed. I think just a really balanced, like run and chase will linebacker. I have him compared to Blake Cashman, and he's my linebacker 5. So, all the guys that you mentioned, I think if they're available there in the 3rd round would be very good picks.
All right, let's talk a little bit running backs. There's a lot of good running backs in this class. I think Nick and I are really impressed with what we've seen so far in this class. The Giants have Tyrone Tracy, a player they hit on last year, and they're bringing back Devin Singletary. I don't think that will preclude them from drafting a running back. I hope it wouldn't. This is a class where I think you'd be foolish not to draft a running back if you're a GM on day 3 at the latest, but I'm fine with that being the case. Let's just do it like this. Are there any running backs in this class that you'd be like, let's go round by round real quick. 65, 99, and then let's get to that last pick at 155, I believe it is. Let's just see, 154. Who are the backs that you would love to get at any of those 3 picks?
So 65, I think that, well, let me just say this. My answer, before I answer specifically, my answer for all 3 or 4, however many rounds you said, would be Damian Martinez out of Miami. Nice. I don't know exactly where he's going to go. Like, I've got him at 63 on my board. I think that he's my running back 4. I think he's somebody that, is proven to be able to thrive in any offensive scheme, because he comes from Oregon State last year where they're running a bunch of outside zone, was very productive. And then in Miami, they're running a lot of power and counter. Took him a couple games to kind of get into the flow. But over the second half of the year, it was like, in my opinion, between him and Ashton Genty is the 2 best running backs in college football. But really good size, a very effective short yardage back. He had in all of college football, he had the highest success rate on runs when he was contacted behind the line of scrimmage at 30%. But then for his size, also really quick moving laterally. He can make those sudden cuts in the open field. I just think he's an incredibly underrated player. So, yeah, I would say, like, if you've got to spend a day 2 pick on Damian Martinez, that's great. If you can wait and he falls to day 3, even better. But for guys that probably are going to go on day 2, I think that there's a lot of day 2 guys that I think maybe don't pair as well with Tyrone Tracy, because they are kind of pass catching specialists. Like, I'm a big fan of Trevor Etienne, but I feel like that might be a bit redundant. Same thing with Jaden Blue out of Texas. But Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee, I was surprised that I liked him. I almost never like Tennessee like skill position players, but he's one of the few Tennessee running backs that have been like looked good running between the tackles in tight spaces, and it's not just like purely taking advantage of 5-man boxes, although there is some of that going on. And then Cam Skattebo on day 2, I think 3rd round is a good range for him. He kind of gets pegged as being a poor athlete when in reality he's slow, but he's very explosive. He's very quick. So I don't think it's fair to like call him a bad athlete across the board. And like, obviously everybody knows about the incredible contact balance, but he has reliable hands. He has really good vision. I think he can be a complete, like I would say 2.5 down back, because don't ask him to pass protect. That's clearly the biggest weakness of his game.
So I love that you oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, I was just going to ask James something because he said that he doesn't usually love the skill position players of the Tennessee Volunteers.
Yeah.
What was your opinion of Biletnikoff Award winner Jalen Hyatt?
Oh God. Yeah, no, it's like the production was all just Mickey Mouse shit. Like it was just switch release, like pinpointing the worst defensive back on whoever they were facing, and like getting them into conflict, and he's just like running in a straight line. So yeah,
I'll say this about him. He could track a damn football. There was some high level tracking and concentration.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to say he would play above the rim necessarily, but those were traits that I got excited about when the Giants did draft him. Now, I didn't know how he would translate from a release package off the line of scrimmage, a route running package. All of those remained a little bit unclear, and they have not developed since he's come in the league. At least it doesn't seem like, since he doesn't see any damn snaps, despite the fact the Giants traded up to select this. I'm sorry. But anyways, yeah. So I just wanted to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, a few things on that note, because it's interesting. When it came to Jalen Wright last year, when I did my film evaluation on him, I felt like identical to what you just broke down. I was like, wow, this is a really hard back to translate to project because of what you just said. So many of those 5-man boxes, but like he's kind of worked out a little bit on a per touch basis for Miami when I've watched some of their tape. So I'm starting to reevaluate that. And Nick and I really liked Hendon Hooker when he came out of the draft. But I will say this, just because of the way he released the football, but I will say this, I do believe that I'm right on board with you when it comes to Scadaboo, the running back at Arizona State. I think he's the most overthought prospect in this entire draft class. The fact that people think he's going to bust, or people think he's like a day 3 guy, to me is absurd. Like, you just need to watch the tape and see him taking over games and doing everything on the field for that team. So to me, if the Giants get him, I'd be super happy. He's probably the one running back I would want more than any back in this class, just based on that. I want to, before we move past, this is on my mind, and I want to get your thoughts on this, because he's a player who, from a physical trait standpoint, I absolutely loved. And then he kind of fizzled out last year. And I just want to get what your perspective is as somebody who watches a lot of Tennessee football. Nico, and I believe it's Iamaleava. Is that how you pronounce it?
It's Iamaleava.
Iamaleava. What are your thoughts on him for next year's draft class? Is he as high ceiling as he was originally projected to be? What happened at the end of the year? Why did that pass game just look like it was just absolutely collapsed at the end of that season?
So I think that I definitely think he has a high ceiling for sure. The way that I think there's kind of like three segments of the Tennessee season, like as it pertains to Nico. The first half of the year, they're playing like really weak competition, and he was pretty productive. And then for whatever reason, got like Heisman hype after throwing for 300 yards against Chattanooga. Like the hype train just was way too quick with him, because he was such a highly rated recruit and everything. Over like the kind of middle of the season, early middle of the season, like the next 4 or 5 games, he had really struggled with deep accuracy. Like he was constantly overthrowing every single open deep shot that ever came open. He was overthrowing. And then he got so much better over the second half of the season, and like his accuracy was so much better. And then Tennessee's receivers would drop every single deep throw that he put right on the money. So I felt pretty good about the way that he played from like week 7, like the Florida, Alabama, Kentucky, Mississippi State, like that stretch over the kind of middle to end of the season. I thought he played really well. Ohio State was like a rough game, because he was just kind of getting pressured so quickly. But I don't know that I'm particularly excited about him as a draft prospect for next year. I think number one, he's got to add weight. He's got to put together a full season of like being accurate, and then like his arm is silly, but you're still kind of stuck with the same concerns, which is that they don't really run like real passing concepts. And I think even compared to someone like Hendon Hooker, was operating this kind of joke of an offense, but he was at least doing it at a super efficient level. And like his processing and decision-making was very clean. And Nico still needs to speed up in that area. Yeah. So like as a Vols fan, I feel pretty, good about him, that he'll be a good college quarterback next year. I don't know that I don't see him really as a first round prospect unless he takes a major step forward, which is obviously possible because he's such a young player.
All right, James, before we get you out of here, we want to ask you, since you're well-versed in this draft, who are James Foster's favorite day 3 sleepers? Any position, the floor is yours.
Okay, let's see. So I would say first guy that comes to mind is Zoff Frazier out of UTSA. Ran a 4.37, led college football corners and interceptions last year. He's like a slightly less athletic version of Tariq Woolen, where he's got this, long frame. He's 6'3", really long arms, got the straight line speed. I think he has better tape than Tariq Woolen, but not quite the 4.2 athlete. So yeah, if you just want I would say developmental, but like, I don't think there's a lot of raw aspects to his game. I mean, only has 2 career missed tackles, a ton of production, kind of a scheme dependent player, but really like Zoff Frazier. Mentioned Damian Martinez. He would probably be the other guy that I would go to. Let's see. I'll say the last guy that I would mention would be Logan Brown, the tackle out of Kansas. I have him at 104 on my board. He's 6'6.5", 311 pounds, almost 35-inch arms. Had, I believe, the fastest short shuttle time of among tackles at the combine, 4.51, which is 88th or 89th percentile for tackles. He's a former 5-star recruit, started his career at Wisconsin, and had some injuries, so wasn't able to really get playing time, and then like punched his teammate in practice, so he got kicked off of the team. But then transfers to Kansas, and I thought he had excellent tape last year. He, I think he's had the best run blocking tape in this offensive line class, and I think he's the most complete run blocker because he's an outstanding reach blocker. He can drive people off the line of scrimmage. He can pull, get to the second and third level and eliminate safeties. And then Kansas's scheme from a pass protection standpoint is kind of tough to evaluate because they kind of run the option and there aren't a lot of true pass sets, but like he had very few losses in pass pro. He's got the ability to redirect. That short shuttle really shows up on tape when you watch him mirror inside counters and some of the recoveries he's able to make. So I would definitely go with Logan Brown if I'm looking for a developmental offensive lineman on day 3.
Well, there you go. We probably went over 30, 35 prospects on the show. Your depth of knowledge, James, is incredible, impressive. I learned a lot. I'm hoping the listeners will learn a lot as well. There are a lot of options for the Giants. Nick and I have a lot to go over as we get into some other podcasts with our thoughts. I really thinking about this class, especially on the interior defensive line at 34. It's been kind of where Nick and I have been locked, but there's going to be talent at 65. There's going to be talent at IDL at 99 and 105, honestly. It's how these drafts work out. So thanks again for joining us, James. You can find him on YouTube at James Foster. Just type that into search. NoFlagsFilm is the Twitter X handle. It's where you're going to get a lot of cut-ups as well. I would really highly suggest following him and reaching out to him for anything else. And he's also an NFL draft analyst for the 33rd team, so I'm sure you've seen his work there as well. James, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, for the rest of you, have a great rest of your week. We don't know exactly when we're dropping this, so it might be weekend. And go Giants.